Do you remember the 1970s, the decade that marked an unprecedented boom in the automotive industry? The number of cars worldwide nearly tripled in just 20 years, and with that came an enormous wave of discarded tires. In the early 1960s, there were only a few 100 million waste tires per year, but by the 1970s, that number had already exceeded 1 billion, and today the total has reached around 6 billion, enough to wrap around the equator more than 150 times. The problem is, global recycling capacity back then could only handle about 15%, so where did the remaining 85% go? Some were burned, releasing toxic smoke. In the US, the Wesley Tire Dump in California held more than 34 million tires. In Kuwait, the Sulabia Tire Graveyard stacked over 50 million tires, so massive that NASA could easily see it from space. And in Nigeria and India, sites containing 70 million tires have existed for decades. And that's not all. Many were buried, leaking zinc and chemicals into the ground. Others were dumped illegally, becoming breeding grounds for mosquitoes and sources of underground fires. What will humanity do with the massive mountains of tires that are growing faster than we can handle them? Countries have begun racing into a technological competition to save themselves from a black disaster. One of the most notable solutions is pyrolysis, a no-oxygen heating process at 450 by 550 degrees Celsius that turns waste tires into oil, steel, and carbon black. China, India, and the EU have already operated more than 1,000 plants, recycling hundreds of thousands of tons of tires each year. But even then, this only handles about 5–10% of the world's total waste tires. Japan has also experimented with supercritical water technology, which can break down tires in 30 minutes and turn them into oil, gas, and carbon black. As you can guess, the operating costs are extremely high, so it remains only at the experimental stage. In the US, Japan, and Australia, old tires are shredded and mixed with asphalt to create rubberized roads that are more durable, smoother, and reduce noise by up to 30%. Arizona alone has used more than 25 million tires over 20 years. Impressive. But compared to the 1 billion tires discarded each year, it's still just a drop in the ocean. In addition, the Earthship movement in New Mexico uses thousands of rammed earth tires to build homes that are insulated, storm-resistant, and capable of generating their own energy. Some countries use tires to make retaining walls, embankments, and even small artificial islands. In Europe and North America, tires were once recycled into children's playground surfaces, but after discovering that rubber crumbs may contain carcinogens, many places began phasing them out starting in 2018. Tire companies are also trying to green the industry. Michelin and Continental are developing tires made from dandelions, wood cellulose, and bamboo fiber. Goodyear is testing airless tires that are 5 times more durable and eliminate puncture risks. However, all of these remain in the testing phase and cannot yet replace traditional tires. Even though most of these ideas are still in the experimental stage, they all sound pretty advanced, right? But before these proposals existed, they had already created a disaster from tires. Can you guess what they did? You probably wouldn't think of it, but they actually dumped them straight into the ocean. Yes, 2 million tires, Florida, the ocean, done. By the late 1960s, Florida was drowning in a waste tire crisis. Tires don't decompose and can last 50–80 years, even longer than nylon-reinforced tires. And because each tire is about 75% air by volume, they take up a massive amount of space while offering almost no recycling value at the time. Florida was stuck. Political pressure kept rising. In 1972, a company called Breward Artificial Reef Inc. proposed a 2-in-1 plan: dump all the tires into the ocean to solve the waste problem, while also creating the world's largest artificial reef to boost fish populations. Like hitting 2 birds with 1 stone, right? About 2 million tires were selected. The drop site was just 1 mile off the Fort Lauderdale coast near the Osborne Reef, an important but declining marine area. And once the idea spread, dozens of organizations supported it. Broward County officials backed it, and even the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers joined in. Everyone was excited. Even more reckless than the idea itself was the fact that they actually did it. In June 1974, more than 100 private boats crowded off the coast of Fort Lauderdale like a 1970s maritime festival. Leading the fleet was the Navy ship USS Thresher, giving the project a military halo never before seen in the environmental history of the United States. Bundles of tires, each bundle holding dozens, were tied together with nylon ropes and steel clips, then pushed down to the seafloor. In just a few days, 2 million tires were resting underwater, covering 150,000 square meters of seabed, just over 1 mile from shore and about 20 meters deep. If lined up end to end, they could form a rubber road stretching from Florida all the way to Havana, Cuba. But the star of the operation was Goodyear. The company saw it as a golden PR opportunity, donating thousands of tires, sponsoring the tire binding equipment, and even sending the Goodyear blimp to drop a gold-plated tire into the water as a symbolic, underwater groundbreaking ceremony. Florida newspapers compared it to laying the first stone for an underwater city. Goodyear's press release was full of confidence. The tires would become the perfect refuge for fish, helping double or even triple Florida's marine biomass. Journalists called it the permanent solution to tire waste. No one checked whether nylon ropes could withstand saltwater. No one tested the tires under tropical storm conditions. And no one asked whether marine life actually wanted to live on tires. But on the seafloor, the truth was completely different. In theory, an artificial reef only works when the structure is heavy, large, and completely immobile for decades. But tires are the opposite: light, hollow, round, and extremely easy to roll. The smooth rubber surface makes marine organisms almost unwilling to attach to it. The real disaster began when the nylon ropes and steel clips rotted away after just a few storm seasons. No one had tested their durability in saltwater, and once the ties broke, the tire bundles separated like animals escaping from a cage, rolling across the ocean floor. Osborne Reef sits only 20 meters deep, right in the Atlantic storm zone. Every time a storm hit, long rows of tires were swept around like rubber tanks, plowing through the seafloor. Coral shattered. Young coral colonies were trapped inside the tires and smothered. By the late 1990s, only about 10% of the tires were still in place, and only a few weak patches of sponge had managed to grow on them. Some tires were carried by the Gulf Stream all the way to North Carolina, hundreds of kilometers from where they were dumped. From 1974 to the early 21st century, almost no one came back to check on the project. It was applauded at launch and then completely forgotten. When scientists raised concerns in the 1990s, they were ignored because there's no budget for inspection. In 2001, when divers from Nova Southeastern returned, they were stunned. No artificial reef had formed at all. Instead, millions of tires were piled up, and the natural reef had been severely destroyed. Not only did the artificial reef fail, but the natural reef suffered catastrophic damage. Surveys in the early 2000s showed that nearly 10,000 square meters of natural coral around Osborne had been destroyed. The number of young corals trying to settle onto rock dropped by 90% in just 10 years. Many species of fish, snails, and soft corals vanished from the area, while predator populations surged because small fish began gathering around the tire piles. Economically, the damage lasted for decades. The area, once a popular diving site, had to be closed. Many fishermen lost their fishing grounds, and coastal tourism in Fort Lauderdale dropped sharply because countless tires washed ashore after every storm. Experts estimate that the total ecological and economic loss may have reached $450 million USD. Today, science has confirmed that the toxicity of tires is far worse than anyone imagined. Tires are the world's second largest source of microplastics, right after synthetic fabrics. They release benzene, PAH, zinc oxide, and especially 6-PPD quinone, a chemical proven to kill up to 90% of coho salmon within hours of exposure. Even worse, tires absorb heat 3 times more than natural rock, heating the surrounding water and killing masses of fish eggs and coral larvae. When the warnings about an environmental disaster became impossible to ignore, in 2001, Dr. Robin Sherman of Nova Southeastern University became the first person to return to the tire graveyard beneath Florida's ocean. With a $30,000 no AA grant, equal to about $50,000 today, she began testing tire removal. But reality was far harsher than anyone expected. After weeks of continuous dives, her team recovered only 1,600 tires, and each one cost $17, roughly $28 today, to bring back to shore. And if they wanted to clean up the more than 2 million tires still lying on the seafloor, the total cost could exceed $50–70 million. An enormous expense. By 2002, Florida's environmental agency and Broward County joined the survey and came to a chilling conclusion: saving Osborne Reef will cost 20 times more than creating it. Meanwhile, their repeated storms kept tearing apart the tire bundles, sending them drifting farther and farther, getting stuck in fish-spawning grounds, and even smashing into surviving coral reefs. By 2007, the situation had become so bad that Broward County submitted an official request to the Department of Defense, and the U.S. military actually stepped in. The cleanup effort immediately became a nationwide training exercise. 40 military divers pulled up nearly 1,000 tires per day, facing sharks, strong currents, and tire clusters drifting as far as North Carolina, more than 1,000 kilometers from the original dump site. Military reports claimed they collected up to 600,000 tires, but civilian documents confirmed only about 439,000, creating a data gap that persists to this day. One diver recalled having to yank tires wedged inside rock crevices deeper than a 3-story building. It felt like defusing bombs underwater. When the military had to withdraw from the operation in 2009, due to priorities in Iraq and Afghanistan, the cleanup was handed over to private groups. From 2010 to 2024, organizations like 4Ocean and IDC worked almost non-stop, collecting between 2,000 and 5,000 tires every week. Even though by 2019 a total of 250,000 tires had been removed, by 2024 more than 500,000, possibly up to 700,000 tires, were still scattered across the ocean floor. Costs continued to rise, from $17 per tire in 2001 to $18.75 in 2018, and $29.50 in 2024. The cleanup contract has now been extended through 2028, and at the current pace, Florida will need at least another 10–15 years to finish undoing the mistake once believed to be America's ecological breakthrough. But the story isn't just about cost. As the Osborne Reef disaster became increasingly undeniable, the state of Florida once tried to determine who should be held responsible. They considered suing Goodyear, the sponsor of the tires and equipment, or the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the force that helped carry out the project. However, every legal effort failed. Osborne Reef was a multi-agency project. Private companies, local government, the military, and 1970s environmental groups all contributed, but no one served as the official project owner. The result was a tangle of responsibility so complicated that no one could determine who was at fault, or where the fault even began. Broward County records show that environmental groups prepared to file class action lawsuits in 1982, 1991, and 1997, and all three were withdrawn for the same reason: they couldn't prove legal liability for any single organization. In the end, Osborne Reef became one of the largest environmental disasters in U.S. history, and not a single person or institution was held accountable. But within that legal darkness, another story emerged. A story few people ever think about. Tire removal itself became a business. It sounds crazy, but when the cost of cleaning up each tire reached nearly $30, everyone realized that behind the effort to save Osborne Reef, a new market was forming. To take part, you couldn't just be an environmental enthusiast. You had to start a company, obtain waste management permits, hire dive teams, buy lifting equipment, and sign contracts with the government. The clearest example is Osborne Reef. On average, the project brings in about $5,000 a day, but that money doesn't go to the divers. It goes straight to the company running the contract. Think about it for a moment. With the extreme danger of diving through thousands of tires, sharks, and strong currents, how much do the divers earn? $150? $200 per shift? The rest goes to equipment, insurance, fuel, and of course, the profit margin that no one really knows. One IDC diver once shared, "We pull each tire up one by one, but every time I surface, I ask myself, Who does this money really belong to? After half a century of trying to fix their mistake, Florida finally decided to do what many people say should have been done in the first place. They launched Osborne 2.0, a completely new artificial reef project, this time with no tires, no temporary materials, but with honeycomb concrete, limestone, and bio-neutral structures, materials that have been proven to work in dozens of successful artificial reefs around the world. The project began quietly in 2023-2024. The concrete modules were designed with high porosity, accurately mimicking the structure of natural coral reefs, allowing young corals to attach 6 to 8 times more easily than on rubber surfaces. But there is one truth scientists always repeat: the ocean does not heal quickly. Even with perfect materials, ideal conditions, and constant support, it will take 20-30 years to fully evaluate whether Osborne 2.0 actually works. Think about it. It took exactly 50 years for Florida to admit the first mistake, and now another 30 years to find out whether this scar can heal. The new project is full of hope, but no one can say for sure. One marine ecologist once said, "The ocean can forgive, but it never forgets." The question now is, will Osborne 2.0 become a successful act of redemption, or will it become chapter 2 of an old mistake? And now I want to ask you, do you think we should continue building artificial reefs, or should we let the ocean recover on its own? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this story worth thinking about, don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss the next discoveries.